Hey everybody, welcome to Grace. Y'all doing all right? Yeah, doing good. Awesome. So we are in our third week of the book of Romans, talking about finding freedom. And if you're new here today, I don't normally sit in a chair. I rolled my ankle a couple days ago. I was running from a bear, and no, I was actually walking downstairs. It's a super lame story. But anyways, rolled my ankle, so I'm going to be sitting some. That's just a FYI for all of you. So I want to recap last week. It was the central thesis in Romans. And it's all about the gospel. That it's the power of God that saves us, that rescues us, that changes our life. Last week we talked about righteousness. And talking about righteousness, that it holds three ideas. The first one is that it's God's righteousness, the attribute of God, specifically his justice. It's righteousness in the text also meant a status that's given to us by God, that we are righteous because of Christ. And it's also an activity that God came in and actually did something to save us. He sent his one and only Son, his righteous Son. There's something I didn't say last week, and it kind of ties into this week. In Greco-Roman times, they had an idea of what righteousness is and was. In that time, Nero minted a coin. Nero was the emperor at the time of Paul's letter. Nero minted a coin, and on the coin, it's really interesting, it was a goddess. And she represented equity and fairness. You know what the word under the image of the goddess was on the coin? Righteousness. People were handing these coins out everywhere. They were paying for things with them. This is a very common understanding of righteousness during this time. Now, here's the reason why this is super interesting. In the text that we're going to be in today, Paul is going to be talking about the wrath of God. And what he's saying is, he's actually setting the stage to say that God is right and just to punish sin. And so that's where we're headed into the text, and that's what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks. Paul is going to dive into that. But he's not just saying that. He's also pointing out something else. That we, you, me, your children, your friends, your parents, everyone is without excuse. We don't have an excuse for walking away from God, for rejecting God, that we all are fallen and broken. And you know what? It's Father's Day. And you know, I was thinking about this backstage, and it just kind of hit me that one of the times in my life that I've seen the most brokenness in my life is being a dad. It's incredible how selfish and how disengaged I can be from my kids. And it's just this reminder, oh yeah, I'm broken. Oh yeah, I need a rescuer. Oh yeah, I need a savior. Oh my gosh, I can't do this alone. I need someone outside of myself, someone who's holy and great, and it's not me. And you know what? Every single human on earth needs to know that. Paul is setting the stage. He's saying, hey, listen, you don't have all the pieces. You're not good enough. And you never will be. And that's why I sent my Son. So if you want to call it the bad news section in the book of Romans, that's it. That's where we're headed today. And so let's jump in. We are in chapter 1, verses 18 to 32. But I do want to tell you this. The backdrop of this passage is Genesis 1 through 3. So if you want to take some time on your own to read through Genesis 1 through 3 after hearing this message, you're going to see so many correlations throughout this text. All right, so let's jump in. Verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. So I want to define a few of these things, especially if you haven't been in church. These are some big words. So the wrath of God, for the wrath of God is revealed. The wrath of God, that phrase literally means God's just repayment for sin. God's just repayment for sin is revealed from heaven. Notice it's not revealed from your mom or your dad or the government or the neighborhood down the street. it's revealed from heaven. The wrath of God. This is a big deal. This is a cosmic deal. This is a creation deal. That God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness. Now, you could look at that term and go, I kind of know what that means. It's unlike God. It's not good. It's not right. It's unholy. But in Greco-Roman culture, it's really the idea of ungodliness is the same word for them as impiety. It holds the idea that you have a lack of reverence or respect for a deity of their time. And especially at their time, it was the emperor. If you don't respect and revere the emperor, you're disrespecting a God. And so Paul is using this language to say, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all impiety, all ungodliness, all disrespect, irreverence before the actual God, the holy God. Not emperor, not the government, not some false God, but the real true God. And unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness, so I want to define that term as well. It's the idea of wrongdoing, injustice, and law breaking. So I want to say it, I want to bring it together. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness or impiety and unrighteousness of men who by their wrongdoing, their injustice, their law breaking, they suppress the truth. So anybody likes to go to the beach around here? Anybody? Yeah? All right. So I got a beach ball for you. Just going to throw it. Nice throw. Love it. Y'all give her a hand. So I got a little beach ball right here, okay? Have any of you ever grabbed a blown up ball like this and tried to push it in water? What happens when you let go of it? It bounces right up in your face, right? So here's the picture. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress, who hold down the truth. Y'all catch that? It's this picture of every human being on earth. What do? They know that there is a God. They know that he created. They realize that everything couldn't just happen all at once or come from dust. And what do? They push the truth down. And they say, no, that's not true. And what happens? It keeps hitting them in the face, right? This actually gives me passion to share my faith more because I see it in people's eyes. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Those of you who share your faith? You see people who actually reject the truth. You know that they see that what they say isn't really true, that it doesn't really make sense, but they love other things. And so what do? They just keep pushing it down. And Paul is saying that all of humanity is pushing the truth down, right? Even though we know that it's not true. There's this sense about us, right? And then he goes into the details of this pushing down. For what can be known, verse 19, about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and his divine nature, his deity, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. And then he says, verse 20, for although they knew God. So the wrath of God, he's saying, is being revealed from heaven by people who suppress the truth. What truth are they suppressing? The fact that it's been plain to them throughout their lives as they've grown up that God is real. That there is a creator and there's a creation, that his eternal power, his divine nature has been clearly seen in what? The creation of the world, the stars, the moons, how our elbows heal, how things about our body heal and grow and they don't make sense. They can't just come from dust, right? It's clearly perceived. Nobody can really debate it. That's what he's saying. It's evident in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse, even though they, next verse, knew God. I just want to stop there for a second. Notice something. Why are they without excuse? Is it because they didn't believe in Jesus? It's not what it says. Is it because they didn't hear the gospel? It's not what it says. It's interesting, right? So this whole, I'm a man on an island, I've never heard the gospel. How is God just and right to send his wrath or to bring justice or payment of sin? Here's the picture. He's saying, look, you haven't followed, you haven't listened, you haven't trusted. Instead, what did you do? You said, hey, I'm not going to believe that. Even though I see it, even though I can feel it, I can sense it, I can infer from creation that God is real, I'm going to reject it. I'm going to suppress it. So it's not about a culture or an era or where you grew up. He's saying that we're all without excuse, and God is just and right to pay for sin. He's gonna dive into this more. But I want to bring this out. So there's these theological terms or apologetic terms, general revelation versus special revelation. This is general revelation. This is natural theology. It's the idea that you can see and look around the world and go, there's a God. It's been revealed to everyone, and so we're without excuse. But the scriptures do say, it's funny, he says, verse 21, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but became futile in their thinking and their foolish hearts were darkened. The scriptures speak of a way that we don't know God, and that's special revelation. Listen to these verses. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 21, for since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God that through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. So there's a sense in which we know God, general revelation, but we don't know God in a salvific way. We haven't been set free. We haven't actually heard the gospel. We haven't believed. Galatians 4:8, formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not God's. And I think even more pressing is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 4. This is very illuminating for this text. That each of you should know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God. This is a different kind of knowing. This is a knowing that changes who you are. This is a knowing that sanctifies you, that makes you holy, that actually brings you from one glory to another glory to another glory as you grow into the image of Christ. That's that knowing. But he's saying, but don't miss it. We are without excuse. We are still condemned. Why? Because we reject the truth. We reject that there is a creator God, and we pursue other things. And that's what he's going to unfold in a minute. So it's not the gospel. It's not a culture. It's not where you grew up. It's the fact that we know who God is, that there is a God. For although they knew God, they did not honor him or give thanks to him. You know, I want to tell you the story. I was in Kentucky. I was in my 4th year in my master's program, and it's a 4-year program, by the way. So don't just be thinking like, oh man, that took him forever, right? So anyways, 4-year program, and I'm on my last year. It's a nighttime. We're going to grab dinner with my parents because they're coming in from out of town. We go to this Thai restaurant, fantastic restaurant. Okay, it is always slammed, hole in the wall. You couldn't even see it off the road. It's always an hour wait. So we get there. It's raining. There's an hour wait. So we go back and get in our car. My parents get in their car. We're sitting there and we're talking. The rain's starting to die down. This guy walks up to my car and knocks on the window. And he's got something that he's selling, except it's a religion. And I was sitting there thinking like, bro, you picked the wrong car. Like, let's go. So I get out the car and I was like, hey man, yeah, let's talk. I got 45 minutes. Let's go. Like, I'm not doing anything. Tell me all about it. So he's about 19, 20 years old. Very educated, super smart, and he's just dialed in. He's telling me that his whole deal. And it's not the typical religion that you would think it is. It's actually, it's a cult. And he's telling me the story. He's super passionate about it. And good-looking kid. Like, anyways, he's telling me about all this, and he's like, yeah, man, I met this guy, and he's this leader, and we've got hundreds of people following him. We travel around, and we share the message and the hope that we have. And so he's telling me this whole deal. And I was sitting there listening to him, and, you know, I've been, like, sitting in apologetics class and, like, all this stuff. So I'm just, like, holding my mouth, ready to go, right? And he's just diving in, saying all this stuff. And I finally just looked at him, and I was like, and, like, tears started to fill my eyes. And I just looked at him, and I was like, man, you got to get out of this stuff, bro. I was like, I'm dead serious right now. What you believe is a lie, And this guy is just some dude. He's not Jesus. He's not a God. And if you don't get out, it's going to bring destruction to you now and for eternity. And I start pleading with this guy, and I'm going full on gospel with him. I mean, I'm diving in with this guy, and I'm pleading with him and saying, hey man, you got to get out of this. I was like, look, dude, I promise, like seriously, you can stay in our home. Like I know you're traveling around, you don't have a house, you're staying in hotels. You can come and stay with us. You can be a part of our community. I've got a fantastic church. Let's do this right now. You've got to get out. It's going to bring damnation to your life. And he's sitting there looking at me, and he doesn't know what to say. And he's just like, and I was like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, do you get it? He's like, I hear what you're saying. He just started crying. I mean, full on crying. And I said, man, I was like, and I'm giving the gospel to him, I'm talking to him, and I go, do you want to do this right now, man? Like, come on, seriously, come with me. Get out of this craziness. And he just looked at me, tears filling his eyes, sobbing, goes, I can't, man. I can't do it. I'm too invested. And it was just this picture of, man, I know that there's a God. I hear what you're saying is true. For although they knew God, they wouldn't honor him or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking. You are going to meet person after person like this. And they don't have an excuse. And my hope and my prayer is that he does come to Christ. I think about him every now and then. I pray for him. I pray that God would change his life. I'm hoping that he heard the gospel and that he's changed forever and that he leaves that craziness. I really am. But that's the picture. We've got people who are their hearts are foolish and were darkened. And verse 22, they're claiming to be wise. They're selling something. They're believing something, but they became fools. And watch this, verse 23. This word comes up 3 times. It's super important to the text. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory, the majesty, the beauty of an immortal God for what? What did they exchange? What did they give up? What did they trade? For images resembling mortal man, birds, and animals, and creeping things. That's Genesis right there. It's idolatry at the core. And you kind of look at that and you go, you gave up a majestic king and God for creeping things? Like that's so silly, that's so foreign, that's so crazy. And yet we do it all the time. When we went through the book of Samuel, chapter 5, verses 2 through 7, it's the story of the Philistines. They steal the ark of the covenant and they bring it. And what do? They grab the ark and they put it into their temple right next to Dagon. It's this serpent dragon deity that they worshiped. So they put it next to Dagon. They go to bed. They wake up in the morning. They go into the temple and they see Dagon is face down facing the Ark of the Covenant. And they're like, what is this? What's going on? What happened to Dagon? What do? They pick up their idol and put it back into place. Just think about that. They're picking up their God because it had fallen face down before the one and true only. So they go to bed, they get up, they come into the temple. What happens? They see Dagon's face down again, but his head severed and his arms are gone. It's crazy. They are believing, and it's not like they turn to God in that moment. They're super scared and they don't know what's going on. But what do? They pick their God up. They have to pick it up. How many of you are picking up gods in your life and putting them back into the place of supremacy in your heart? How many of you are picking that drink up? How many of you are picking up those drugs or putting on, saying, hey, I need this approval. I need to go over here for comfort. How many of you are picking up an idol and you're trading the image of a glorious, majestic God for futile things? That's what Paul is saying. We are without excuse. It's idolatry at the core. Verse 24. Therefore, God gave them up. It's a really crucial phrase. So notice, you're going to see this. They exchanged, and then God gave them up. They exchanged, and then God gave them up. They exchanged, and then God gave them up. But I want to dial in here for a second. The word gave them up there's been a lot of controversy around this word. A lot of people want to define it as a deistic giving up, which holds the idea like deism is like God set everything in motion and then walked away from it. So it's a passive thing. He's not actively actually rolling. It's reap what you sow. And I don't think that's what the text is teaching, and I don't think that's how this language is used here. Therefore, God actively gave them up. It's not a deistic cause and effect, or even as Calvin would say it, a lack of emotion. No, there's emotion involved in here. God gave them up. He cares for them, but God gave them up. Why? Because they reject God. So therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity. Notice that it was already there. They're exchanging this, and then God's saying, hey, if you want this, and let me just define it even more. It's not even just that God has taken away his gracious hand and gave them up. No. God has essentially said, if you want that, here you go. Here you go. Here it is. I'm going to give you what you most desire, and it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good. So God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for, I'm going to change the word it's a definite article there, the lie. We've exchanged the truth about God for the lie, for the idolatry, for like Adam and Eve when they heard the lie that, no, God isn't the way, there's another way, you can be a God. No, that's a lie. They exchanged the truth about God, his majesty, his glory, his perfection, for a lie. And worshiped and served the creature, whether it's a person, a thing, an ideology, rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So this is pointing back to Adam and Eve on one level. That they received truth. Hey, don't eat of this tree. It'll bring destruction in your life. What do? They ate of it. They believed the lie. Israel, coming down off the mountain, they're worshiping a golden miniature calf instead of the one who had parted the Red Sea. It seems crazy. And it is. It really actually is, and that's why we're without excuse before a holy and just God. I mean, we do this with our 401k, with beauty, approval, right? Sex, worth. No, he's going to dive in and explain what this impurity looks like. Verse 26, for the reason God gave them up, there's that phrase again, to dishonorable passions. I want to just say, this doesn't take away from responsibility, but in the Greek, here's the idea of this. Dishonorable passions, it's an involuntary state that comes over a person. Y'all ever been like that? You ever had a passion for something and then all of a sudden you find yourself doing it and you're like, why did I do that? It's not that you weren't responsible or that you didn't know what you were doing. It's just your emotions got the best of you. That's the picture. Dishonorable passions come over you. And then he defines what this passion is. For their women, exchange natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. Verse 27, and the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. So we're gonna stay here for a minute. The word woman and the word men is really female and male, and that's very important. Okay? So female and male. It's pointing to something. It's pointing to a biology more so than a gender. It's not sociocultural. It's actually creation. This is creation language. So first, Genesis 1:27, God created male and female in his image. To do what? To procreate and to have dominion over the earth. There's a design. There's a purpose. There's a creative. Not only that, the word male and female that's used here is also used by Jesus 2 times. Matthew chapter 19, verse 4, he answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Mark chapter 10, verse 6. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. So there's a lot wrapped up in this. Even the Jewish sources, which I'm going to read in a minute, point to this. So their understanding at this time pointed to this idea as well. So for this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions for their women, exchanged natural relations, so relations with other men with the opposite sex, for those that are contrary to nature, against God's design. And men or males likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, other men. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for error. So there's a lot of conversation around contrary to nature. What does that mean? So I'm going to bring some Jewish sources, okay, at the time or near the time. And there's more, but I'm just going to give you a few. Josephus, he's a Jewish historian, declares that the marriage between that of a man and a woman is according to nature. There's that language. And proceeds to say that the Old Testament demands a penalty for intercourse between a male and a male. So that's against nature. That's the idea. Philo and Josephus both criticize homosexual relations as against nature. Testament of Naphtali, so extra biblical stuff, chapter 3, verse 3 to 4. It's not the Bible, but it's showing you the history and the culture. Sees homosexuality as a departure from the order of nature. In other words, it's based on a created order. So Paul is saying, hey, listen, watch the exchange. You exchanged the image of a glorious God for reptiles and creeping things, people and animals. You exchanged the truth for a lie. You exchanged heterosexual, God-created intent relationships for same-sex relationships. And this is contrary to the nature and the order of God. That's what he's saying. Now, there's some arguments against this reading, especially lately, and so I'm going to give you a couple. Here's the reality. I've told college students this. If you go to a collegiate school and they discuss this issue, you are going to get destroyed in class. They're going to say so much that you're going to go, I guess it's true. I don't know. Here we go. Sure. So one conversation or one argument against the reading, the natural reading of the text that I'm suggesting and saying is pedestry. So it's the idea of in their time, it was very common for men to exploit boys, okay? And so they're saying, oh, well, when we read this, they're not talking about homosexual relationships. They're talking about pedestry. There's a lot of issues with that. There's a lot of holes. The first one is there's no recording that we know of women to girls, and that's the first example he gives. There's zero history on that. The second is Paul doesn't say male to boy. He says male to male, female to female. So that's out. Second argument that some people would bring is the idea of orientation. So it's very common knowledge and language that people use sexual orientation. So here's the idea. They would say this passage doesn't have anything to do with someone who has same-sex attraction because they're not going against their nature. They're actually just doing what they feel strongly in their eyes and in their hearts, right? So let me give you an example. If I, for instance, was same-sex attracted, and I was, for the time that I can remember, I'm not, by the way, but if I was, okay, let's say I was since I can remember, I've never been attracted to women. They would say what Paul is saying doesn't have anything to do with me. Why? Because read it. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. This isn't dishonorable. This is just what my heart feels, okay? For their women exchange natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. This isn't contrary to my nature. My nature says that person is attractive and I want to be with them. So that's the argument that's out there. First of all, Paul had no concept of sexual orientation in that way. Number two, the idea of nature goes back to creation. It's in the context here, and it's actually consistent throughout the Bible. And so to put a modern reading into what Paul is saying completely misses the point. And so it's not orientation or exploitation, it's biology, and God's saying, I created you for a purpose and in a specific way. So I'm just trying to be clear as we talk about this. I'm gonna talk more about this at the end. So let's keep going through the text. Verse 28, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. And then he gives this laundry list. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, and malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil. It's a crazy phrase. Disobedient to parents. Did you catch that, kids? Foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. You know what this is a picture of? Paul is saying that when a culture rejects God, this is what it looks like. So he's essentially saying, hey, the wrath of God is being revealed. And here's what it looks like. I'm going to give you what you want. Here you go. And so these verses are actually representing a culture that has left God. It's crazy. It's crazy. We see a lot of that in our culture, right? So I'm not going to go through each one, but that's a list of what it looks like to reject the truth, to exchange the immortal God for mortal beings. Verse 32, this is really interesting, especially in our context today. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, deserve punishment, would be right from a creator God to bring justice. They not only do them, watch this, but give approval to those who practice them. So it's not just doing, but saying, hey, what you're doing and what I'm doing is okay. It's a strong statement. So I'm going to narrow in on the topic of homosexuality for a minute. And there's a couple of reasons. One is, in the 3 years that I've been here, I have not talked about this subject at any length whatsoever on stage. Second reason why it's an issue that seems to have lack of clarity within the church. There seems to be confusion. Also, it's not handled well. We seem to be, and when I say we, I don't mean us. I mean in general, Big C Church. We seem to be sometimes really good on doctrine and really bad on care. And I see that with this issue. And it's difficult. It's difficult to watch and to be a part of and to be represented as the body of Christ. So I want to talk about that. So this is years and years ago, Gene and I did a series together for our family ministry at the church I was at called LGBT and Me. It's probably 10, 12 years ago. And the reason why we did it is we felt like there was an onslaught of things and conversations coming on, and parents and kids had no idea how to deal with it. So we did a survey. By the way, it's all on YouTube if you want to watch it. Gene, I look like we're 10 years old. So I can't go by everything, but anyways. So we did a survey for the parents and the students. And we said, hey, what do you believe about this? How do you handle this, and this? How does the conversation go with this? You know what the majority answer was from the parents and the students? We don't know what to think or believe. We don't know. And so we set it up where we did 4 weeks on a Sunday night in our sanctuary. And Jean and I spoke together and talked about it. From her perspective, from my perspective, we went through the Bible, went through the text. And we actually met with the parents prior to the Sunday and said, hey, if you want to know what we're talking about, I'm going to send you the outline. We're going to send you all the things that we're going to be discussing. If you don't feel comfortable coming or don't feel comfortable sending your kids, then don't. So that's what we did. We set it all up. We did it. We walked through it. And it was a great conversation. But we saw people on the hate end. We saw people on the everything's okay end. And then people that were just confused up and down and all around. So I want to give some just practical advice. I had a guy who came to me. This is actually a little bit after this. And he said, hey, can we meet? And I said, sure. And he goes, I'm same-sex attraction. I've never been attracted to a girl in my life. And it's wrecking my life because I don't know what to do about it. I believe in Jesus. I believe that he's died for my sins. But this thing, I don't know what to do with it. And so I said, all right, well, let's start meeting. So what do you think I did for the next 10 weeks? You think we talked about same-sex attraction every week? No. And I would have missed it had I done that. You know what we did? We took the next 8 to 10 weeks to center our lives around Jesus. Our thoughts, our heart, what we read, what we watch, everything. Everything was about the gospel and how it changes us, how it changes from the inside out. And as we're walking through it, you know what his question really was? Does God love me? Can I be accepted? Like, I don't know what to do with my feelings. God, are you still here? Do you still care about me? Because what I hear from other people is so unhelpful and hurtful, and I don't know what to do with it. God, are you real? And as we're walking through it, the guy's in tears, just praising Jesus, recognizing his identity, his worth, and his acceptance is in Christ alone. Right? And it's changing who he is. So I say that to say, here's practical advice. Whenever you're walking through sin in anybody's life, or difficulty, or brokenness, whatever they're going through is not the most important thing. The gospel and Jesus, centering your lives around him, is the most important thing. Because here's the reality. I mean, let's just take pornography. If you send somebody and sit there, all right, we're going to talk about this thing every week, they're not going to grow. They're not going to change. Nothing is going to be different. They're just going to be constantly thinking about the thing they shouldn't be doing instead of thinking about the one who can change them. Right? So it's important, but it's not most important. A couple other things. Have a hospitality mindset. Have a discipleship-driven mindset. As you talk to people, as you care for people. Don't make it the number one thing that you want to discuss. Center your life around Jesus. Like I said, we can be solid on doctrine and really poor on care, and then we missed it. We're not really helpful. So I want to give you some resources as we close out. 2 are older, and they're a little antiquated in their language, but they're just so good. And the third one's more recent. So Sam Alberry, he's a pastor. He's, as far as I know, all of his life has only been attracted to males. And he wrote a book called Is God Anti-Gay? It's about 60, 70 pages. I actually sent it to all my students of my former church. They all read it. It has a guide on the back, how to walk through, this issue in the world, in my family, da-da-da-da-da. It's really punchy, short, helpful. Second one is What Does the Bible Actually Say About Homosexuality by Kevin DeYoung. That book is going to help you actually get into the text. It's not talking about so much about care as it is about how do we understand the Bible in this issue. Super helpful, about 150 pages. The last one, it's not about homosexuality, it's about transgender. But the terms that he uses are going to be helpful for everyone in this room because a lot of the language has changed and he's dialed into it. It's a guy named Preston Sprinkle. It's called Embodied. And so I suggest that y'all pick those up. Those would be helpful resources. There's obviously others, some I wouldn't recommend and all that, but those are the ones I would. So I just want to leave you with this. Paul is saying that every single one of us is broken and without excuse, and that every single one of us needs Jesus to be delivered and saved. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your Son, that only he can save us. We thank you that when we trust in him, that we are forgiven, that we are set free, that the wrath of God is not going to be revealed in our lives because we follow Christ. And so, God, would you work and move in our congregation, among our people, that we would honor you, that we would worship you, that we would thank you and not reject you. In Jesus' name, amen.